Hi, this is part 3 of Federalist number 2. Let me introduce you to a few books. I don't want to overwhelm you with all these books I show, but some of these books I have read, all of it. Some I've read parts of them. So I want to just share it with you so that later on, when you decide to look a little deeply into the Constitution making or into what went into making of the United States Constitution, it's good to be familiar with some of these titles, read them. This book, Are We to Be a Nation? By Richard Bernstein. It's a good introductory work, so definitely take a look at it. It's got a lot of pictures, so it's very interesting. Remember, I showed you a few books about the Constitutional Convention. Here's another one that you might want to look at. It's called Decision in Philadelphia. It's by Christopher Collier and James Collier. This is one of the other books that kind of tells you about the Philadelphia Convention. I have already shown you this book that I said it's very important because it talks about ratification in the 13 states. It's by Pauline Maier. However, this book, before she wrote this, the only other work that had looked at the 13 states separately, individually, is this book. Ratifying the Constitution. Pauline Maier mentions it, but I don't think is given enough credit to this book. So keep that in mind. Read this too. Okay, very important. Read those two. There is another book that I asked one of the professors, scholars at OU who teaches law. It's at law school. And one of the books that he recommended to me, it's called Liberty's Blueprint. Liberty's Blueprint by Michael Meyerson. I don't have the book here to show it to you, but you can easily look it up. So that's another book that was recommended to me. Okay, I'm going to paragraph 3 of Federalist number 2. It has until lately been a received and uncontradicted opinion that the prosperity of the people of America depended on their continuing firmly united, and the wishes, the prayers, and efforts of our best and wisest citizens have been constantly directed to that object. Uncontradicted means nobody's come and said something against it. It's been unanimous. Everybody, for the most part, has said, stay united. That's how you prosper in the future. That's how you have a peaceful situation. Because he's talking about right after the colonies declared their independence and they went to war with Britain. Of course, when they're in war, they know they need one another. So they're going to stay united. So what he's getting at is that up to now, we've had a war that we needed to win to get our independence. We've stayed pretty united. Everybody's been saying that. But he's going to give a hint that this thing is going to change. That maybe other people are coming and saying, oh, now that the war is over, maybe we can go our separate ways. But he says up to now, especially during the war, it was uncontradicted. Nobody said anything against it. There were no doubt about it. There were no doubts about it. But politicians now appear who insist that this opinion is erroneous and that instead of looking for safety and happiness in union, we ought to seek it in a division of the states into distinct confederacies or sovereignties. So he says, now you're starting to hear politicians saying, now that we won the war, now that we got our independence, let's get together in confederacies. For example, southern states that have slavery, let them unite because their situation is alike. Let the northern states, whose situation is different, they like to trade, they're into shipping and things like that, let them unite. Let the middle states unite. So maybe we can make confederacies. And he says, this is the beginning of trouble. When you hear people talk about making confederacies or different sovereignties, he says it. In other words, these confederacies are going to be sovereign powers. They're going to be just totally different countries. Or maybe at least 13 different countries. He says there are people who are saying, maybe we can just be 13 different new countries. However extraordinary this new doctrine may appear, extraordinary here, it's in the language of 2 centuries ago. It doesn't mean the same thing it means today. He says, however unusual, crazy this doctrine appears, it nevertheless has its advocates. However, there are people who are advocating it. They're supporting it. They're saying, yes, this is a good idea. And certain characters who were much opposed to it formerly are at present of the number. And some of the people who in the past said it's not a good idea to have different countries out of these states, to have separate confederacies, are now saying it's a good idea. All kind of because the war is over and they felt like, yeah, we can go our separate ways now. Whatever may be the arguments or inducements, whatever is encouraging them to talk about it like this, which have wrought this change in the sentiments and declarations of these gentlemen, whatever that has made them change their feelings and ideas and opinion about it, wrought when you shape, you usually use it with metals. You change the metal from one shape to another. He's using it here for the ideas that these men had, that at one time was firm, but now they've changed it all of a sudden. It certainly would not be wise in the people at large to adopt these new political tenets without being fully convinced that they are founded in truth and sound policy. So we have to not fall for this mistake and really pay attention to see what's best for us. What is a sound policy? What's a good way, good thing for us to adopt? And he, almost like Hamilton, he says that we have to be honest. There are, of course, people who might be against this Constitution, and they're good people. It doesn't mean they're bad people. But we have to make sure that when they're saying something, they're criticizing, they're saying it with sound statements. They're just not making up stuff to fool people. One of the good things about the founding of America, and this is why I say America was blessed and lucky. Lucky to have had really, really smart, wise people at its founding, and blessed because of the amount of land, amount of blessing that God had given them. One of the people who opposed this Constitution was James Monroe. James Monroe became president after James Madison. So he was the 5th president of the United States. So in a country where you have good people, wise people at the time of the founding, they don't feel like you got to kill the person that opposes you. Maybe the person who opposes you really believes there's something wrong with them, with the idea you're proposing. And it's not because of hatred, it's just they have a different opinion. So this is one of the good things that happened. The people that were pro-Britain, they called them loyalists. They did not have any mercy on them, the American revolutionaries. They ran them out of town. A lot of them went to Canada. A lot of them went back to England. But the true Americans that were not loyalists but had problems with this Constitution, they were not run out of town. They were not called traitors. It's just different opinions. So it's good to keep that in mind as we go forward, that in the future, just if somebody says something that might be different from our opinion, it doesn't mean they're traitors or backstabbers. Could very well mean that they've just come to a different conclusion. I hope that in the future, their mind, their opinion changes.